right, here he is, Masterpiece MP, I think it's 41, yeah, MP-41 Dinobot from the Beast Wars line. Excuse me, and he's actually pretty cool. Now, I do have him standing here on the base. The base does come with it. There's a neat connection port here, and we'll show that off in a second. You don't have to display him on the base. He is technically capable of standing on his own, but for some reason, both in Dino mode and robot mode, his ankles are just looser than they should be. Like the stand, I don't know if they did that to make the stand necessary, which seems weird to me, but like you can get him to balance on his feet. I've had him balanced on his feet, but he really likes to flop forward and back if he's not on the stand. We'll take him off the stand shortly, and I'll show that issue. But for right now, just showing him off. Here he is on the stand. In his Dino mode, he's a little chunky. You can kind of see he's a little bit of a chunk, but he's not completely off of his animation model. He does have, you can see in the back here, you can see a lot of the robot mode bits, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, they've made a pretty decent figure out of making it as show accurate as possible. And this is one of the prices you have to pay. These things are hard to take these organic alt modes and have them fold around into robot modes. Not ideal, but like I'm willing to forgive it because one, he's going to spend probably a lot more of his time in robot mode on the shelf with the other Maximals, but it is there. His tail, it comes packaged straight, and it looks okay straight. It does have plenty of hinges in it. You can swing it side to side. You can lift it up. There's a dual hinge back here on his tail. So you've got some decent articulation in the tail itself, but once you start bending these joints, the joints become super obvious. If you have it straight out, they blend a little better. You know, there's some gaps and some holes, and you can still see the hinges, but they're not as obvious until you start bending them, and you start seeing these squared off edges where the hinges rotate, and it kind of loses some of that illusion. It is neat that you can pose it and you can have it in not just a straight back pose, but yeah, like I said, the hinges do become a lot more obvious once you start moving that around. His sword stores in the tail, and again, we'll show that off later. And now what's neat about the stand, you get two of these bases that are plugged together, and then this bar that goes on top. I'm going to go ahead and start taking this apart. So first off, we'll go ahead and lift him up off of it. Now this whole clear assembly unpegs from the stand itself. But it actually, the way it attaches, it actually folds in and hides the attachment points concealed within the Dino mode itself. This is visible, but there's an extra piece up in here that once you pop this off, it actually attaches around this port here. And there's like a little foldable piece, so you attach it up in there and then you can fold this around. But the fact that it actually attaches securely without having any holes on the outside of his dinosaur mode, aside from the gaps, you know, for the robot mode. And there's an underside shot. You can definitely see some robot mode bits, mostly his feet and shins back here. So here he is in dinosaur mode without the stand, and you can see he's kind of, you get him too much from straight up balanced, he does like to either fall forward or back. You can, like I mentioned, you can get him to stand on his own without the stand, but he starts wobbling. You can handle a little wobble, but if he starts wobbling back and forth too much, he is going to just fall right over. The stand itself, like I said, comes apart. And again, this is probably for robot mode. And this is kind of neat in that this articulation, like I had it down so his feet were sitting here, but if you want to have him in a leaping pose, this whole assembly comes up with this little piston here. This piston doesn't seem to extend, but it rotates. There's slots here in this bar so you can lock it up if you want it to be a more vertical stand, anywhere along. Like I said, I mean, even with the degree of angle customization, I guess, the angle is pointing. You got some really fine tuning here in this stand, and once you lock it all in, it's very solid. But yeah, so you've got this bar right here, and then this piece can hinge on here as well as from side to side for action poses. It's really kind of neat, and we'll see it some more in robot mode. And then there's two panels here. It says, at first I thought they were identical, and like the minute you start looking closer at them, they actually are not at all. Let's see if I can get this off of here. There we go. So there's four. They can go together in a lot of different ways. This is how I had them set up. You can see one panel has this groove in this front. They're different panels. This piece has the 4 ports down here. Unfortunately, it doesn't separate, so you can't use... I mean, you can use it like this on just one panel if you want to have a smaller display space, but you can't get rid of... unless you just cut this off, which would be ridiculous. This piece is always going to be this length. So you kind of have to. But you can see, though, there's 4 post holes on each one, because these can connect pretty much any 2 corners. If you'd rather have them this way, with the tracks going across, you can do it that way, and you still have the 4 holes lined up to plug that rail in, which is kind of neat. Anyway, that's the stand. We'll come back to it in robot mode because he does have an adapter piece to hold him on in robot mode as well. So here's Dinobot, and like I said, his legs themselves are kind of locked up here, and the shoulder issue we'll get to. But he's got knees right here. You can kind of bend his legs a little bit. His robot mode fist, you kind of have to... The robot hand wrist joint does fold in, so you can bend it and then keep that hand inside this cover here, but as you move it, it will like to pop out instead of folding easily unless you hold this down while you're doing it. And he's got, like I said, he's got the loose ankles here that you can also rotate side to side. His claws are kind of posable. They're mostly there for folding up. For robot mode, you've got the posable tail. He's got ball joints up here at his dino arms. He's got a bicep swivel, an elbow hinge, and then a dual hinge there at the wrist itself with his little clawed hands. His mouth opens and closes. His tongue is inside of there, can also move up and down inside the mouth like that. So however you want to have him, his mouth open, and his neck turns and he can look up and down. Although it doesn't hinge here, it only really hinges side to side and then up here at the head. He does have a neat eye changing gimmick. You can see he's got his kind of wide open eyes looking forward here. But if you lift this piece up, this whole assembly rotates around, and now he's got squinty eyes, his skeptical eyes. But yeah. He also comes with the golden disc accessory. And I'm mentioning this here in Dino mode because he comes with a little clip to hold it in both robot and Dino mode. You can see there's a peg on the top and the bottom. So you want to use this, or the side and the bottom. You want to use the side peg for Dino mode, but you can clip the disc, which is actually a really nice golden color, the Sounds of Earth, and then the glyphs on the back side. But if you rotate his wrist around, I guess you have to bring it up like this, and use this flat peg, and kind of look like he's holding it in his dino paw, like that. And of course, if you want to, you can plug it in the other way, but let's get it off of here. It'll look a little silly. And what's neat, one of the things that I also think is really cool, one, they package the disc in its own separate plastic baggie to keep it from getting scratched, which is nice. But if you don't want to have him holding it in either mode, you actually get this little stand, just a little clear stand. You can stand it up just on display with this little piece right here. Didn't need to include that, but a neat little extra for the golden disc. So on to the fun part, transformation. And the first thing you want to do really is pop his tail off. It's plugged in to this panel right here, so you can kind of lift these panels up, unplug them from the legs here, and lift this up. And you can see it plugs in a couple different places. There's a peg here on the end that pegs in up here, and then there's a little tab on the top that locks into a slot right up here on the top of him. So when he first comes with the tail detached, and you do have to kind of lift this panel up. I've made it work without popping this panel up, but it's way easier if you just pop this up. Make sure that peg goes in first, and then just push it up into the top, and you'll hear it click, and then just kind of fold it. It comes kind of straight, just fold it down on the hinge to cover up the rear kibble on the back. But we'll go ahead and take that off and put that off to the side for the time being. So you lift this panel up, take these 2 panels, fold them down around to the side, those are his robot mode thighs, and lift this panel up. And you can see here's his head kind of stuffed into his guts, and we're going to start working on the legs and the arms here. So the legs come out, you untab the feet, and flip out the heels. This one has a little tab to lock it together that you just fold up. And then you bring, once you get the feet out of the way, bring these gold pieces up here. Like this. And then unsnap the legs here and extend them out and click them into place like that. And same up here. So you've done that. And now you need to come out here. The legs are tabbed in. This little skin colored hinge right here is tabbed into the leg. So you want to pop that off. Actually, you may want to open this up first. Go ahead and open up his dino belly. And here's a better shot. You can see that whole hinge there that's locked in up here. And untab that. You can see there's the tab right here in the underside that tabs into a slot in the hinge here on the leg. There we go. And that'll allow this whole assembly to swing down freely. And then you can work on the legs themselves. Lift this up. The lower legs you actually pull out and lift up and snap into place up here. Again, this one you can kind of see a little better. See how it's kind of off-centered? You bring that up so this ridge should match this ridge on the leg. So you just kind of bring it out to the side and snap it up like that. Rotate his feet around like this, and then rotate them so they're facing forward. And then this little peg piece right here will peg into the back of the ankle piece like that. Do the same here. Bring the foot around and peg that piece on. That's not snapped in all the way. I'm not pegging in. There we go. So you've got the feet done. His dinosaur head, turn it around, close it up, and there's like a little kind of cup here in his waist. Just fold his dinosaur head down in like that. Go ahead and split his chest apart. Now the chest comes apart. It's tabbed together up here, and it also, there's some slots here that tab into these, so make sure you're getting that all, when you're going back, make sure to snap that all together, and then just swing these out to the side here. And we're getting somewhere. So this whole piece comes up. Oh, you want to, before you do this, his dinosaur head, lift this up so you see his eyes, and then fold this panel in. Like that. So there's a little gap there. And then this folds up, and these two tabs right here kind of rest against his dinosaur neck. Then you can flip this whole thing over here. And we'll get to locking this around in a minute. Have his legs, make sure his legs are facing, rotate them at just above the knee so they're facing this side with the bone. And then you can rotate his whole waist around. Now that's facing the front. This comes down, and then this piece comes down, and then you fold the inside of this over so it reveals his dinosaur eyes, like that. And now you have his chest panel. Now this will end up pegging in here to this peg right here, as well as a couple little tabs on the side, but it's easier to get these arm panels locked in if you leave this loose for right now. The arms, you take this, rotate the whole assembly around like this. This piece right here comes down, make sure this is folded in, comes down, and it actually wraps around the dinosaur head inside of his torso. And then this joint right here, you lift up and put his shoulders into place like this. And then you see once that's right, this will look like this. This will wrap around the dinosaur head and his torso. And you know you've got it lined up right. This golden piece here should kind of line up with his collar. Let me lift this up a little bit. Same on this side. Bring this up, bring that down, bring this piece up and around, like that. Into there like that. Make sure this piece folds under. So So you're kind of making the core of his body. I like that it hides his dinosaur head as well as forms a more solid core to his body. And make sure this is all sitting forward. Like that. And then back here, bring this down, bring this down. These panels, actually I want to lift those up a little bit for the time being, because it'll help you get all this locked together. His dinosaur arms kind of fold up and tuck away into his body. And this can be tricky. We just kind of want to fold the arm up like that and tuck it into this gap up here. And then this will fold around. When you get it all lined up, it takes some finagling to get it all lined up right, but this should, once you get it lined up just right, you can see, there we go. This should come around to this panel. And this is why we left this detached, because these panels fold out a little bit, and it's way easier to tab this in to the side when you can move these out. You can do it with this attached. I've done it, but it's a whole lot easier and a whole lot less stressful if you can fold that tab out and then just kind of bring them together here on the side of his body. We'll go ahead and flip this tab up. We'll use that here in a minute. So bring his dino arm around, actually like this, and kind of again rotate it up into that gap. And it helps to kind of push it in there as you fold this around until that all comes together. And then tab that together. And then these panels right here, if they were open like this, just push them flat against his back. Now go ahead and bring his shoulders down and go ahead and peg this onto the front and bring his head down and turn it around. Kind of looks like he's dancing now. And now it's just the arms left. So up here, open up this panel. This is where the fist was coming out in dinosaur mode. Bring this down, pull this out, and rotate this whole thing around. You want to fold up, all of his claws fold up into the foot itself. Snap this together, fold this up, bring this down, fold this up into the bicep, and then close that over it, and then rotate it forward. Make sure the shoulder pad sits on top of his arm, and then rotate his wrist. And there are his individual articulated fingers. He's got 3 and 2, just like that, and do the same over here. Hold those up, plug them together, extend it, and rotate his hand properly. Rotate his bicep forward, and there's Dinobot in robot mode. He is pretty impressive looking. I always feel like his head is too big for his body, and then I look at the renders on the and again, here's where you're talking about the ankles are a little weak for the figure unless you get him standing just right. I always feel like his head's a little too big for his body, and then I look at the CGI renders and I'm like, oh no, that's actually pretty accurate. He does have light up eyes. It takes 2 LR44 batteries. You just unscrew this panel back here and stick them in, and then there's a little button right here on the back of his head that lights up his eyes. And then if you hold it down for half a second, it turns green. I don't know how well you can see that. And then if you touch it again, it'll turn back to red. And just like Prime, it'll stay on for 10 seconds or so, and then turn itself off. His mouth, his head is a little limited. Like, he can turn side to side, but he doesn't have a whole lot of up and down movement, which is kind of a shame because the way it sits in his body without lifting the neck up out of the cavity, his chin kind of hits his guard here, which is disappointing because he does actually have opening mouth, which is kind of cool. But if you want him to be looking forward, you pretty much have to have that chin up and have it pushed right down around that collar. So a little disappointing there. Posability wise, like I said, he's got the head side to side. It's technically on a ball joint. It can look up and down a little bit, but the transformation hinge in the front doesn't let him look down much. And to get him to look up, I guess he can look up fairly decently with his head down on the collar, but to get any real articulation out of it, you kind of have to lift his neck up away from his body, which is a shame. He's got ratchets here, bicep swivel, ratcheting elbows. He's got the wrist swivel as well as an up and down wrist. He's got the individually articulated claw fingers on each hand. He does have the waist swivel, ratcheting hips in both directions. Don't worry, that's not a crack. That's just where that panel folded up at the beginning. Rotating. Like the knees, you kind of have to grab him. Make sure you grab it by the pauldron, because this, if you pull it right here, that's where that, remember when we smush these together? So you kind of have to grab it by the pauldron and grab him like that. But he does have nice ratcheting knees. And then he's just got friction hinges on his ankles. They do tilt in a little bit, so if you want him in a wider stance, his foot can still sit flat, and they rotate. But again, some small friction or some small ratchets in there would have been nice, because you can probably tighten that up with some floor polish, but it makes it a little wobbly. He does have that heel there as well, and some toe articulation, or maybe not. Huh? He's got a pin there, but his toe doesn't actually move. So yeah, like I said, you can get him to stand. He's more he can stand more solidly here in robot mode than in dinosaur mode, but it's still a little topsy-turvy, and that's a little disappointing, especially in robot mode. I could handle him being a little floppy, being such a large bipedal dinosaur with weight on both ends. Is more where the ankles are more of a fulcrum. Here in robot mode, I really feel like he should stand a little bit more solidly. His tail, as I mentioned, splits in half. And inside there is his sword. Now you can leave that in there and turn the tail into a weapon. There's these discs right here. The first couple of times were very tight, and it looks like there's a little line on each side that originally I thought was a crack already in these as soon as I opened it. And it's not a crack, but there's just a line on each side. It doesn't appear to be a crack. I've seen no damage or anything. It hasn't widened or doesn't stress or anything when I'm moving it, but there's still a little dark line. And part of it's just because it's kind of a swirly metallic plastic, and it looks like that's just a dark part of the plastic. But yeah, so this is tough, and it actually gives you a little sheet that kind of shows you how to you kind of wiggle it as you pull it out. Like it's basically looking at it from the top and saying, hey, as you're trying to extend this, try wiggling it back and forth, because this is going to extend out. And basically what it's telling you to do is, as you pull down on this, also try wiggling it back and forth. And it does make it a little easier. It gets a little looser with transformation, and also just because of the way it folds around this stuff, it kind of manages to pull it out just by the leverage. So be careful with it at first, but know that it will loosen up over time. And then you just rotate this around. This peg goes in here, and then there's a tab down here that tabs in right here. There we go, just like that, and the same on the other side. Just kind of wiggle it as you extend it. Rotate it around, and like I said, it does get easier with transformation. Fold that, and then you've got you can give him his little spinny weapon. There's a little post here that you flip out, and you see now it spins freely. And it's hard to do it without it pegged in, but as you push this, it kind of does a little spinny motion. I'm going to try to see if I can do it here without... you can kind of see how it's spinning when I push it, but the shape of this, it's more likely to just pop out of your hand if it's not tabbed into something, which is why we're going to tab it into his hand. And if you tab the weapon into his hand just like this, and then push this button, well, even then it wants to pop out. It's not, and this sword popped out, which is okay. We're going to take it out anyway, but you can see you can get it rotating and spinning. Let's see if we can get the sword back on there just to show it spinning with the sword on it. This is not the best angle, but to keep it from flying around, you can see you can get a little spinning weapon there. There we go. If you want him to use it like that. You can also take the sword itself out, flip the handle down, and it's got a little peg on it. The sword piece itself rotates a little bit, but it feels like it may be a screw, so like it's getting tighter as I turn it this way, so maybe don't swivel it too much. No, it's a pin, but still. And then just plug it into either hand. And now he's got his sword. And if you want to display them like that and not sure what to do with the tail, this is where this little panel on the back comes into play. It's not great, but you can fold this back up into tail mode, or into halfway tail mode. Lock this in place here. Rotate this around and fold that down. And then when you lift it up here, you can see there's a couple little ports here. And if you flip out this piece on his back, it's supposed to like peg on here, and then you can fold this around that, and it can kind of hang on his back. But if you try to put too much pressure on it from above, after it's attached, this panel comes down and it just kind of pulls it right out. But it doesn't tab on securely. Again, maybe a little floor polish on these tabs would help. If you just want it to rest there, you can kind of get it to do that. The problem is, like, it pegs in, but it's not securely enough where you kind of have to hold it together as you fold this in, or it's going to come loose again. But you can peg that onto his back and have him carry it around like a backpack, although it's not going to take much of a bump to knock it right off, because it doesn't clip or lock in. It just kind of rests on those tabs. Or you can just leave that folded up. So yeah, he's a little beefy in the backpack, but all in all, his robot mode's very nice, and I'm quite happy with that. The engineering involved to make this happen is pretty cool. He has 3 alternate faces that come with him. You've got his standard, just kind of wide-eyed, snarly Dinobot face. You've got a sad, grumpy face with like a frown. You've got kind of a half smirk face, and then another kind of grunty face with, you'll notice he has clear eyes on this one versus the red painted eyes on all the other faces, and that's for his beam effect, which we'll show off here in a minute. We're going to go off and show off all the different faces. They all also have opening mouths, which is nice. Regardless of the facial expression, all the mouths open on all the faces, which is kind of cool. Kind of gives them a devilish grin there. And to pop it off, you can see it's the side. I found the easiest way with these side pieces here is just kind of grab his head and push on those 2 side panels from the back. And wow, that actually came off really well. But usually it'll give you enough leverage to go ahead and slide it the rest of the way off. There's his inner mechanics there. You can see some wires going up into his neck. So here he is with just his frowny face. And that's probably the one I'll leave on. He's got, like I said, his eyes are slightly squintier, and he's got like a frown. They do still light up if you push the button. Here is his smirky face. Again, you can kind of open and close his mouth there. And then with his effect face, the clear eyes. Now, when you put, like I said, when you push the light, it actually looks pretty nice with just the red lighting, if that's how you want to do it. Although you lose some of that. It just like it makes his eyes look dead when the light goes off, as opposed to the shiny metallic paint on the other faces. Like I said, it looks like he's deactivated there. So that's one drawback. But you also get this eye beam effect piece, which can snap into his eyes and light up. Let me see if I can. And if you hold the button down, get like a green light up effect. It's less impressive here with the overhead lights. Let me see if I can't get this all the way off and see how well that looks. Oh well, now his eyes are. There you can see some of the lights traveling a little further down the beam. It doesn't quite, unless you're looking at it dead on, it never quite gets all the way down, maybe in complete darkness, but it does give it kind of a cool effect. I don't know how often I'm going to leave them with the I-beams attached, but it's something you can do regardless. There we go, turn the light back on, and all of a sudden he's whited out. There we go. So we'll go ahead and we'll pop those off and swap his face back out. Oh, look, his whole face came apart. Well, we can put that back together. I did not realize those were separate pieces, and now I know. Knowing's half the battle. So let's see, we'll go ahead and put his standard big-eyed face back on here. And then the stand piece, the last piece of the puzzle here, he also comes with a little clear stand adapter. This piece that plugs in, it's got pegs that plug into all of the peg holes here on the back of his waist piece. So you just snap that on like that, and now you can use him on the action base. Again, a little limited because you kind of have to use all 4 of these. I feel like he could be stable with just using 2, but because this mechanism is 4 long, you really need to have. Either way, you're going to be using this length of space, whether you're using both of these or just one, because this thing comes out the whole way. A little bit of a drawback, but you know, hey. But then you can have him, you can plug him in here if you want to have him like a action pose up in the air, like maybe he's leaping. Again, now his head's off the screen. Like he's doing like a leaping attack, and because of the posability of this, you can lower him down and hinge him up so he's just kind of standing on his feet. Which again, does make him more secure because of those ankles, but that's a lot of, if you just want him in a display, that's a lot of flat shelf space dimension-wise, just to have him be a little bit more solid. And again, he can stand a little bit more solidly in robot mode than dinosaur mode without getting bumped. But it would have been nice if he just had like some stiffer ankles to support him, because you can see he is very top heavy with the backpack and everything. And even in the review, see, I can't push him back enough to get him all the way in frame because of the depth. This is a good 3.5, 4 inches sticking out behind him. And last but not least, again, that little golden disc clip. You can clip it back onto the disc, and again, use the lower peg instead of the side peg, and plug it into his hand, and now he can hold up the golden disc to taunt Megatron or anybody else with it. Look at it. Contemplating his future. So yeah, he's very posable, he's very expressive, and he's a cool looking Dinobot. Transformation is involved, but not so, like I said, I did it once with the instructions, and I have not used the instructions since, and I've gone back to dinosaur mode to robot mode several times without having to reference those after the first time. Like it's kind of a, there's a lot to it, but it's intuitive once you know where everything's supposed to go. There was some issue, people were having issues with the shoulders, this ratchet hinge up here getting too tight. And you can see, if honestly, it was the left shoulder that was cracking on a lot of people's, because there's a tab here that was shearing. And then in some people's cases, like that was already out of place, because that's what makes the ratchet work. That's what holds this inner gear in place. Some people got some with that already sheared out of the box. Now, like right now, I don't feel like looking at the two of them, and like some people have had some where it's very visibly mismatched and almost about to come out of that slot right out of the get-go. And mine has been fairly, they both look at installed at about the same depth. It may be possible to fix it by pinching this pin and maybe making that a little tighter. I didn't have any issues with mine. The left shoulder is the one that's usually the problem. I did not have any issues with mine for the first couple of transformations. And then I noticed it starting to, it just felt a little tighter than it was when it started. Maybe it would have been okay, because like I said, I every time I moved it, I would look under the armpit and check that ridge. And it never seemed to be stressing or moving in a way that worried me, but it just felt tighter. And so what I did, on Evangelist's advice, I got some shock fluid, RC Car shock fluid. This is 70 weight. I think Vangelis has 80 weight. All the weight is, the higher that number, the thicker the solution is. And like 70 weight and 80 weight, I can't imagine it's that different. I don't know, but it's 100% silicone, so you know it's not going to mess. It's for RC cars, so it's not going to mess with the plastic. And literally, like, all I did was take a toothpick and get just a teensy bit. You don't need a lot on the tip of the toothpick, and then I kind of moved it up. You can see as it moves up and down, there's a gap there in those gears. I just kind of moved it a little bit so there was a gap there between those two ratchets, and just kind of slowly dipped. I mean, just a little bit. And the thing is, like, I didn't use much. Like, I've read you don't need a lot. I used very, very little, and I was still, even after a day or two, was still getting like some oil seeping out. Like, even I used way too much, and I used like a minuscule amount. You really don't need a whole lot. That bottle of shock fluid will probably last me for as long as I collect things. But now his shoulder is, honestly, I think this shoulder is working better than this one. This one has the standard tightness, and I may even hit that with some shock oil just to be safe. But doing that, again, it was starting to get tight, but I wasn't starting to see any damage. I wasn't seeing any evidence of damage, but just preemptively, I went ahead and did it. So if you're concerned about that, that's an easy way to fix it. Like I said, I've had no issues with it since. And this bottle of, like I said, that's how big is this? It doesn't say how much is 2 fluid ounces. And I used, like I said, enough, like it wasn't even like a drop on the toothpick. It was just enough to like have a sheen on the toothpick is all I worked in, and it was still almost too much. So this bottle will last you a good long while if you're worried about that. And this bottle was like $4 at the hobby shop. So you're not going to be breaking the bank if that's how you choose to fix the shoulder if you have that issue. All in all, I'm very happy with him. He's very cool. I'm super stoked now for Megatron to hit because I'm really digging the Beast Wars figures. Before we go, of course, I'm not gonna leave you hanging with that. I posted a picture earlier, but here he is. There's Masterpiece Primal, Masterpiece Cheetor. And then because we don't have masterpieces of them yet, Generations Rhinox, who is a little short now by comparison. He should be between Primal and Dinobot. And Generations Rat Trap. So let's get the good group shot of them. They look great together. Like I said, I really feel at this point like a Masterpiece Rhinox that fell somewhere in height where he should between Optimus and Dinobot would make me happy. I would love to have a Masterpiece Rat Trap just because I think he was one of my favorite characters on the show, and I'd like to have them all as masterpieces. But a bigger Rhinox would be all I really need. This group looks great together. So he's expensive. I see where that expense went having played with the toy. I feel like you get a decent amount of extra pieces with him to kind of help justify that. And like I said, if you can afford it, if you're collecting Beast Wars, or if you're just a Beast Wars fan, I think he's worth trying to get one because it really is a nice, solid figure, weak ankles in both modes aside. So there he is, MP-41 Masterpiece Dinobot.